like to begin by acknowledging the traditional owners of the land on which we meet today, the Gadigal people of the Eora Nation, and pay my respects to elders past and present.
This is an acknowledgement of the land, an important formal statement that recognizes the fact that an event or a meeting is taking place on the land of Aboriginal or Torres Strait Islander peoples. This type of statement can also appear at the end of an email, on a website, or on a building. This acknowledgement in itself presents an opportunity to show respect to the traditional owners. In the past, different Indigenous nations used the welcome to country as a protocol when crossing a border into somebody else's territory. When entering a new territory, Aboriginal or Torres Strait Islander peoples would ask for permission to cross the border. If granted, the host would welcome them and offer them safe passage. In return, the visitors respected the laws and the protocols of the country they were on. In the current day and age, it has adapted to the current circumstances, but the idea of the welcome stays the same.
To get a deeper understanding of Indigenous Australia, we attended a lecture held by Uncle Jimmy Smith. He is part of the largest Aboriginal group in New South Wales, known as the Wiradjuri people. This translates to People of the Three Rivers. For the last 3 decades, Uncle Jimmy has dedicated his life to educating people about Aboriginal history and culture as a way of spreading awareness. We were able to interview him to gather personal insights from someone firsthand. You may have seen this flag throughout Sydney. Uncle Jimmy will now help us better understand its meaning.
I wanted to go back to kind of like the significance of things that you were touching on before. I know the flag has a very specific meaning, and I was wondering if you could talk about that a little bit.
The black is for the people, the red is for the earth, and the yellow is for the sun. The sun gives life to both, to the earth and to the people. And it also unites the people and the land.
Right.
We are one.
Yeah.
And
Which is so important.
since the colonials have come here, they've assaulted the people and they've assaulted the land in that process.
The story behind the flag is just one of many stories told by the Aboriginal people of Australia. Over many thousands of years, the First Nations people have created an extensive system of ideas that carry deep meaning for Aboriginal people and serve as a blueprint for life. These are called Dreamtime stories. In Aboriginal culture, storytelling is not just about telling a tale. It's a practice that weaves together the past, present, and future, and defines life as an interconnected web between humans, nature, and mythic beings. The telling of these deeply spiritual stories serves as an educational instrument and a powerful guiding force in the lives of Aboriginal people. Filled with mythical beings, ancient creatures, powerful forces, and important life lessons, these stories captivate listeners and allow them to understand the world and their place within it. They are passed down through generations via oral tradition, art, dance, and song. These stories vary amongst different Aboriginal communities, but all serve the same purpose: to better understand the world around us, teach us lessons, and connect back to history. We asked Uncle Jimmy to tell us a bit more about dream stories, and here's what he had to say.
One of the stories that we do talk about is about greed and selfishness. So that's a big drive, and this is a big part of storytelling, Indigenous Australian storytelling.
Yeah.
Is it has these morals in it that you should be listening to what's going on right through this whole process.
It's kind of like a guide, like something.
Speaking of history, in 1788, the first 11 British fleets anchored on the lands of the Aroa people, marking the start of the first convict settlement in Australia. Only a year later, a smallpox epidemic broke out in Sydney. This was one of the many diseases brought to Australia from the Western world. Besides new diseases, colonization also led to widespread killings of Indigenous people, along with the mass appropriation of land, water, and natural resources. The differences in how the Western settlers and Aboriginal people understood and interacted with nature further deepened these conflicts. A huge part of how the Australian environment looks now can be contributed to the Indigenous people. While nature developed with the Aboriginal people, they also evolved with it and ended up developing a deep connection to the country. That is, the land, sky, sea, rivers, plants, and animals. The understanding of this nature was integral for survival in an environment as harsh as Australia. Beyond the previously mentioned storytelling, the Indigenous people also passed down their ecological knowledge, resulting with a system of adaptive management of nature. Since the soil in Australia was for the most part of low fertility, the Aboriginal groups adapted by adopting a partially nomadic hunter-gatherer lifestyle. This included careful fire management intended to boost fruitfulness of the land and to protect important cultural sites. Deliberate fires contributed to a large variety of habitats and developed in different stages of post-fire recovery. When the Europeans arrived, the environmental changes increased largely. The land began to be cleared for agriculture and urbanization. Non-native species were brought in that harmed the already existing plants and animals.
Since the British colonization of Australia and the widespread killing and displacement of Aboriginal people that accompanied it, First Nations people continue to face inequality, political exclusion, intergenerational trauma, and ongoing institutional racism. These flaws in society present themselves in a number of different ways, but one of the most blatant examples is seen in the health discrepancies between First Nations people and other Australians. According to the Australian Institute of Health and Welfare, the burden of disease among First Nations people was 2.3 times that of non-Indigenous Australians. This stems primarily from disparities in healthcare access and quality. In addition to this, there are significant inequalities in other realms, such as education and the workplace. Discrimination is something that these people deal with daily. We asked Uncle Jimmy for a more personal experience.
How was that experience of you going through school being the only Aboriginal?
In 5th grade, 3 other Koreas came. Mm-hmm. And you wouldn't believe it, all the violence stopped because I had backup.
Wow.
So it talks about the cowardice of these rednecks.
Right.
So it was a really hard place to grow up.
Mm-hmm.
And if we had a park like this, we'd be in it all the time. So I become a street kid over there.
And what can we do as individuals to help combat these issues?
I have a question for you in regards to what we were touching on earlier about the biggest things that they're facing today. What do you think that we as individuals can do to help that situation?
Advocate. Yep. Talk up, have courage.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what everybody doesn't have, is that courage to talk up.
Yeah.
You know, and students have asked me for that question for years.
Yeah.
I've been working in these for 9 years now. This might be the 9th or the 10th year, I'm not sure. How many students have asked me that question? What can we do?
Mm-hmm.
First of all, have courage, do the right thing, stand up. Standing up.
A great way to learn more about Indigenous people and their culture is to immerse yourself in events around Sydney. NIDOC Week occurs over the second week of July. This acronym stands for National Aborigines and Islander Day Observance Committee. Over this week, many events are held to recognize the histories, cultures, achievements, and ongoing contributions of Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people. This includes markets supporting Aboriginal-owned businesses, as well as art displays and song and dance performances.